Welcome back to Wellness as a Way of Life. I am so excited today for this interview with the Cindy Gallop. She is the founder of MakeLoveNotPorn, a social sex tech platform with the tagline pro sex, pro porn, and pro knowing the difference. It is designed to promote good sexual behavior and good sexual values, which I really want to ask her about that. And she launched it at TED in 2009, and for which she has raised 2 million. We'll check in on that. Yeah, it's the social sex revolution. And we're going to talk about how challenging it is as a female founder, and then, probably 1,000-fold as a female founder in sex tech to find funding, and not to mention all the other issues on the back end of having a sex tech startup. She's even starting her own fund. I can't wait to ask about that. And she has like the best Twitter and LinkedIn bio probably of all time, which is I like to blow shit up. I am the Michael Bays of business. Welcome so much to the podcast, Cindy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm thrilled to be here.
I would love if we could define our terms a little bit. How old is the term sex tech, and is it a flexible thing, and what is it not, that people maybe are confused about?
Sure. So I actually pioneered the idea of sex tech as a category 10 years ago now, because I was finding it enormously challenging to raise funding for Make Love Not Porn. And so I'm a great believer that when you have a truly world-changing startup, you have to change the world to fit it, not the other way around. And so I deliberately, 10 years ago, set out to define, pioneer and champion my own category, sex tech. Because in order to create investor receptivity, I needed to give Make Love Not Porn somewhere to live. And there wasn't a category that embraced it at the time. So I literally wrote the definition of sex tech. And unfortunately, for many years, when you Googled sex tech, I was result number one on page number one. But then the site this was posted on took it down. So sadly, that's no longer the case. But sex tech is any form of technology designed to innovate and disrupt in any area of human sexuality and sexual experience. I coined the hashtag sex tech. I didn't invent the term, but I'm directly responsible for propagating the hashtag as widely as it's used today. And I began speaking at tech conferences all around the world on why sex tech is the next trillion-dollar category in tech. Because I thought at base level, if I just say this loudly enough, often enough, in enough places, people start to believe it. And they absolutely have, because sex tech is now a thing. It's a known category. But unfortunately, the one aspect of it people have not embraced is funding it. And so I continue to fly the flag for the fact this is the next trillion-dollar category in tech, because we need to make that shit happen.
So you've already started the fund?
So I should explain. And by the way, I've realized I need to update my bio on my personal website, because I realized that's what you
way more than that, have you not?
Yeah. So essentially, finding it challenging to raise funding for Make Love Not Porn, I eventually became so frustrated. I went, in order to get my own startup funded, I'm just going to have to get the entire category funded. And so, and again, this is 10 years ago, in a seemingly counterintuitive move, I went, if I can't raise $2 million to scale Make Love Not Porn, I'm going to raise $200 million to basically create the world's first and only sex tech fund. Because if nobody else is doing it, then I will. And honestly, Megan, quite frankly, this was an act of desperation. It was a last resort. I can't get funded. I'm going to have to find a way to fund myself. So I then, and by the way, in all of this, I live my own philosophies. All the advice I give to entrepreneurs, I operate myself. And, what I say to entrepreneurs, especially female founders, because things are much more difficult for us, is, whatever you want to do, make it real. And so I went, right, I'm going to start a sex tech fund. I'm going to give it a name. And I knew I wanted to focus on the fact that, as far as I'm concerned, the future of sex tech is female founded. And so the name I gave my SexTech fund derived from a famous quote by Chairman Mao, who many years ago said, "Women hold up half the sky." I think that's relatively unambitious, and so I called my SexTech fund All the Sky Holdings. And in fact, listeners, if you go to alltheskyholdings.com, you can find the holding page for the fund there. And I began making it happen. And, I discovered, and as I say, this is like 10 years ago, I discovered that, what I surmised was correct. Actually, there are more investors out there willing to fund a fund than an individual sex tech venture. And that's for two reasons. The first is, I do your due diligence for you. I am the OG domain expert. And so I can source the deals and present the deal flow because no other fund or VC is investing in sex tech. There is no, category expertise. They don't have existing due diligence into this area. So that's very appealing. And the second thing is that when you fund a fund, you are at some remove from actually funding a venture to do with sex. And both those things I found were very appealing as I began talking to investors. But I actually garnered the fund because I then raised the funding I needed from an unexpected source, my original angel investor. And I had to kind of focus on Make Love Not Porn. But as and when I can raise the funding that I'm now looking for, I absolutely intend to go back and activate and absolutely start that sex tech fund because the opportunity is even greater today than it was when I first had this idea. So it may be on the back burner for now, but it is very much something I plan to do in the future.
Beautiful. I think that's brilliant. Okay. So, I'm a proud investor in Make Love Not Porn.
Which I love, love, love. Thank you so much.
And for me, as a mom of two boys, like what really got me interested was this, the way that you explain, first of all, it wasn't a gap in the market. Like you've created this market. You saw that there was this need for a different narrative and a different option of people are always going to be interested in watching others have sex. So let's give them an alternative. I'd love if you could go into, how you kind of parse that out for people and the difference between traditional porn and what's offered on Make Love Not Porn.
Sure. So I should explain for our listeners' benefit that Make Love Not Porn was a complete and total accident. I never set out consciously intention to do anything I very bizarrely find myself doing. It came about from my own direct personal experience dating younger men. The men I date tend to be in their 20s. And 17, 18 years ago, long before anybody else identified this, I began realizing through dating younger men that I was encountering an issue that would never have crossed my mind if I had not encountered it so personally. I realized I was experiencing what happens when two things converge. And I stress the dual convergence because most people think it's only one thing. I realized I was experiencing myself what happens when today's total freedom of access to hardcore porn online meets our society's equally total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sex. It's when those two things converge that porn becomes sex education by default in not a good way. So I found myself encountering a number of sexual behavioral memes in bed. I went, whoa, I know where that behavior is coming from. I thought, gosh, if I'm experiencing this, other people must be as well. I didn't know that because 17 years ago, nobody was talking about this. Nobody was writing about it. This was me in isolation as a naturally action-oriented person going, I'm going to do something about this. So 16 years ago, I put up on no money, pure little side venture, a tiny clunky website at MakeLoveNotPorn.com that in its original iteration was kind of a public service announcement. Porn world versus real world. Here's what happens in the porn world. Here's what really happens in the real world. I launched Make Love Not Porn at TED in 2009. I became the only TED speaker to say the words "come on my face" on the TED stage several times in succession. The talk went viral as a result, and it drove this extraordinary response to my tiny, clunky website that I had never anticipated. Thousands of people wrote to me from all around the world, young and old, male and female, straight and gay, pouring their hearts out, telling me things about their sex lives and their porn watching habits they'd never told anyone before. And I realized I'd uncovered a huge global social issue. And so that was the point at which I went, oh my God, I now have a personal responsibility. I have to take Make Love Not Porn forwards in a way that will make it much more far-reaching, helpful, and effective. And so I turned into a business designed to do good and make money simultaneously, which is what I believe all business should be ultimately. Basically, as I've said for 16 years, the issue isn't porn. The issue is that we do not talk openly and honestly about sex in the real world. Because if we did, people would then be able to bring a real world mindset to the viewing of what is performative, produced, scripted entertainment. And so I went, okay, I need to make it easy for every single person in the world to be able to talk openly and honestly about sex. How am I going to do that? So I decided very simply to take every dynamic in social media and apply them to this one area of universal human experience that no other social platform allows in order to socialize sex. So I turned Make Love Not Porn into what it is today, which is the world's first and only user-generated and, importantly, 100% human-curated social sex video sharing platform. So the kind of what Facebook would be if it allowed you to openly, healthily, socially, sexually self-express, which it clearly does not. The way to think about it is, if porn is the Hollywood blockbuster movie, performative, produced, scripted, Make Love Not Porn is the badly needed documentary. We are a unique window onto the funny, messy, loving, wonderful sex people are actually having in the real world. And as I said, we are socializing, normalizing, and destigmatizing sex, bringing it out of the shadows into the sunlight to promote consent, communication, good sexual values and behavior. We are literally sex education through real world demonstration.
So I'd love to hear about the, specific feedback. I can tell you personally, my husband and I watched our first video yesterday
Oh my
and
God, fantastic.
sparked all this conversation. I mean, first of all, he was just so curious, like, how does it work? And I'm like, it's all curated, like, look at the comments. They're all extremely empowering and positive. And yeah, like, I mean, you can talk lots about that, but I think it's a conversation starter in a way, even in a couple, we've been together for 15 years.
Exactly, Megan. I'm so glad you've seen that for yourself, because you're absolutely right. And by the way, a key part of that is it's not just what we do; it's the way that we do it. So basically, everything about our site is consciously intentionally designed to normalize talking about sex. So for example, years ago when we were designing and building the platform, my brilliant user experience designer, wonderful woman called Uni Chase, she said to me, everything on the internet to do with sex is dark and black. We're going to be white. And so that's why we have a white background on Make Love Porn, because we are bringing sex out of the shadows into the sunlight. One reason our members love us is because when you arrive at Make Love Not Porn, that is absolutely how you feel. This is natural and normal. One couple said, watching your videos, we feel able to talk about what we see in them as naturally, normally, as to talk about what we see watching Netflix or TV. And then, to your point, from discussing what we're watching, it's just one step to talking about our own sex life in a way that really improves it in all sorts of ways. So that's absolutely the case. But also, what is great is, as a unique business, at Make Love Not Porn, we have a unique capability. We have the power to change people's sexual attitudes and behavior for the better in a way that nothing else can. And so in the 12 years we've operated as a business, we've taught countless young people that porn is not sex in the real world. Gen Z loves us. We have saved numerous marriages and relationships. That's literally how people write to us. You saved my marriage. You saved my relationship. And by the way, what's interesting about that is a woman wrote to us and she said, this is last year, I think. She said, my husband and I have been married for 20 years and sex had dwindled to maybe once every 3 or 4 months, if that. She said, this is the best $10 a month I've ever spent. Because, they found us, they subscribed. She said, in the first month, we had sex 8 times. And, she raved about our wonderful videos, our Make Love Not Porn stars. And then she said, but, it's not just the sex. My husband and I now feel closer to each other, more connected, more in love than we have at any other time previously in our marriage. And she ended the email, thank you for saving my marriage. And that is wonderful because, we are absolutely we celebrate the joy of love, intimacy, human connection in a way that, transforms people's sex lives accordingly. Then, what is great also is that for years, parents have been buying their teenage children subscriptions to Make Love Not Porn because they tell us, and I quote a mother, I want my kids to see what happy, healthy, loving sex relationships actually look like. And in fact, in the past year, those messages become increasingly desperate. So a mother wrote to us a couple months ago and said, I've just discovered my 13-year-old son is watching Pornhub. I would rather he watched Make Love Not Porn. I know he's underage. Can we find a workaround? And, at Make Love Not Porn, we are more legal than legal. We are for 18 and over. But, our policy is that parental judgment trumps that. As a parent, you know what's right for your child. And so to her, and we've had this request from another number of other parents with, underage teenage children, absolutely, this is your decision. And so that mother has now gifted her 13-year-old son a subscription. And we very much hope that helps.
I love how you are talking about potentially a family subscription plan as another workaround.
I mean, yeah, no, absolutely. Because, a woman, heard me talking on a podcast and wrote and said, I have 3 teenage sons. I want to buy them subscriptions, but obviously I don't want to buy each individual subscription. Is it possible to have a family plan that's discounted? And I went, oh my God, I love that idea. And so my team and I are now working out how we can have the Make Love Not Porn family plan for, enlightened parents like that, which I just think is wonderful.
I agree. So a little bit further down that path, let's talk about the Academy. I know personally my experience in the Canadian education system now with my kids in the Canadian education system and the Mexican and what sex ed looks like these days. And it's, not enough that they're not going to be curious. And then of course we know they're going to stumble on porn at some point anyway. So having a resource that's really like, okay, here's a good brace to go for all of your curiosity. And again, framing it, I do want to talk about sexual values because I think that's such a great place to start when kids are asking these questions. And I just love how you're thinking about going about it.
Thank you. So MakeLoveNotPorn.academy is a product I've had in the pipeline for 10 years because parents and teachers began reaching out to me from day one of Make Love Not Porn, begging me for it. And Megan, this is a frustration about my challenges fundraising because everything I want to build is not finger in the wind stuff. This is not me going, I think this will fly. This is literally what people are asking me for and have been for years. So basically parents, reached out and said, love what you're doing. I need the 0 to 18 version. Help me educate my children from ground zero, And equally, teachers reached out. I remember, again, many years ago, back when Twitter was much more a force, not the shit show it is currently. But, somebody tweeted saying, oh, wow, learning all about Cindy Gallop and Make Love Not Porn at school. And I replied, I went, really? And I went, yeah, but our teacher's showing us your website and talking about you and showing us your TED Talk. And I went, wow, I love it. And obviously, by the way, because they did not have the materials with which to have this conversation. So, the idea I had was building Make Love Not Porn means that over the past 16 years, I built up a huge network of sex educator friends all around the world who face all the same problems I do. Their content gets blocked on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Their accounts get suspended. They're banned from promoting and advertising themselves. And they are doing phenomenal work. And, and obviously over time, unfortunately, this has only gotten worse. The shit show that we're seeing in the US currently means our freedoms are being rolled back as we speak. Open, healthy sex education is being blocked, censored, and deplatformed everywhere. And so I came up with the idea of Make Love Not Porn Academy with the mission to organize the world's sex education information to make it universally accessible and useful. That is a deliberate paraphrase of Google's original mission statement, which was to organize the world's information to make it universally accessible and useful, because in this area, they absolutely are not. Today the algorithm is biased and it's censoring. Even if you're looking for this wonderful work, you can't find it. So, I conceived of Make Love Not Porn as an aggregation play. We are building the go-to global hub for the best of the world's sex education content. So the way it works is, exactly like Make Love Not Porn, user-generated, crowdsourced, curated revenue share. We are in full educator outreach mode right now because, wonderful people like you investing in our WeFunder means that we have raised enough to start designing and building the academy. And the game plan is, if we can hit goal, to launch later on this year. And so we invite educators, and I use the term educator very broadly, sexual health and wellness experts, therapists, health professionals, podcasters, to share with us their own content, coursework materials, books, videos, comic strips, whatever it may be that they're producing. Now, very importantly, as with Make Love Not Porn, with the Academy, we will operate our unique model of what I call the human curation layer on top of the internet. Humanize, vet every educator and every piece of content before we publish it. In the same way that on Make Love Not Porn, there is no self-publishing anything. We watch every video, review every profile post, every comment before we publish it. And, our criteria are very broad. On Make Love Not Porn, our curation criteria are: your video must be legal, consensual, and real. And then anything goes, because we exist to celebrate the full glorious spectrum of human sexuality. Equally with the Academy, your content must be educational, fact-based, and non-judgmental. And then, anything goes. And so the idea is then to aggregate all of this content and then to publish it easily searchable by age appropriateness. So if you're a parent freaking out going, oh my God, my 6-year-old just started with this, what do I say? We will give you the tools and content to be able to easily have that conversation with a 6-year-old. If you're a teacher of a class of 14-year-olds, here is a whole range of curricula, lesson plans, different approaches that are age appropriate, again, that you can pick and choose from. If you're an adult, access all areas. Adults are equally desperate information. And this will be cradle to grave. We're going to have like menstruation education, menopause, et cetera, et cetera. But importantly, the Academy will be where children and young people can access sex education without parental teacher gatekeeping. And the reason that's important is, I have a friend who's a mother. And as you have to these days, she monitors her kids' browsing history. So this happened a few years ago. Her son was 8 years old, and she saw to her horror that on the family computer, he had Googled sex for children. So she freaked out, but did the right thing and stayed calm, sat him down. Darling, I happened to see that you told me through why. This anecdote is adorable and horrifying in equal measure. Her son wanted to learn about sex. He was a child. He knew he was a child. He wanted to learn about sex in a child-appropriate way. He sweetly, innocently Googled sex for children. You can imagine the kind of thing that came back utterly traumatized. And so the Academy, where an 8-year-old boy can enter his age on the homepage, and we will only serve him age-appropriate sex education content. And, the key thing with all of this, Megan, is I'm out with the Academy to prove concept. And what I mean by that is, for years, people have said to me, oh, Cindy, you should go into schools. Make Love Porn should be on the curriculum. And I've always said, no, I shouldn't. Because anybody trying to bring sex ed into schools comes up against parent-teacher association, moral panic, But here's the thing. The people keeping sex ed out of schools don't know what it'd be like if they allowed it in. They just think really bad. In their heads, they have this abstract concept. Sodom and Gomorrah will ensue. when I can show you what doesn't exist anywhere at the moment, the best of the world's sex education content all in one place, when you can see for yourself at a glance how brilliant, informative, educational, healthy, and non-threatening it is, when you can search it, as I said, by age appropriateness, by cultural sensibility, because we will have Jewish sex ed, Muslim sex ed, Christian sex ed. And when, importantly, you can pick and choose according to your personal comfort level. We just aggregate all this. You decide what's right for your family, what's right for your class, and what's right for your school. That is when I think I can help get sex ed into schools. I'm building this outside the system to try and get into the system.
Okay, so we've got the layer of the social issue of, bringing the conversation out into the sunlight for adults alike, everyone, and then helping children of all ages, or really just people of all ages, have reliable information. And, again, it's encouraging that it's not something that should be a taboo topic to talk about, and all of the benefits will come with that. And then I know one of your many higher missions is really ultimately end rape culture. So can you talk us through that a little bit?
Sure. So yep, our ultimate mission at MakeLoveNotPorn is to help end rape culture globally. And I'm fully aware that sounds like an extraordinarily ambitious vision, but we have 12 years of proof of concept at a micro level already. So we help end rape culture by doing something very simple that nevertheless nobody else anywhere else is doing. We help end rape culture by showing you how wonderful great consensual communicative sex is in the real world. Our social sex videos role model good sexual values and good sexual behavior. And here's the important part. We make all of that aspirational versus what you see in porn and popular culture. One man left a comment saying, "This video makes me want to be a better man in the bedroom and in life." We can do that. And equally with the Academy, I want to take this message as far upstream as possible. I want to give parents the tools to be able to start talking about sex to their children as early as possible. Because, as I said, parents have been writing to me for 16 years. And I've been giving this advice for 16 years. And in fact, one of the things I'm going to do when we launch the Academy is I'm going to video my own mini masterclass of advice for parents based on, what I've been sharing over the years. And there are two very simple pieces of advice that I've been giving out for all that time. The first is that I say to parents, today, you cannot begin talking to your child about sex too early. And when I say that, I don't mean literally talk about sex. What I mean is the very first time your child asks where babies come from, plays with their genitals, the most important thing isn't even what you say as much as how you say it. Never, ever get visibly flustered. Never get embarrassed, never get annoyed, never shut the conversation down, change the topic, leave the room. Instead, answer your child calmly, straightforward, and truthfully, because by doing that, you open up a channel of communication between the two of you that will always be there for them as they get older. And you absolutely want to do that because, what parents want more than anything else is for their child to be happy. This area will impact your child's happiness more than almost anything else. Then the second thing I say to parents is, today, when you talk to your child about sex as early as possible, you must also at the same time talk to your child about porn. And this is much easier to do than most parents think, because all you have to do is share, say a version of what one about to share with you, and you dial it up or down depending on the age of the child. So you say, "So darling, we just talked about sex. And you know how together we watch movies and videos and cartoons where things happen that aren't real. Well, there are also movies and videos about sex, and they're not real either. And because of that, they can be quite confusing. So we'd rather you didn't watch until you're older. But if anyone ever shows you anything like that, or you come across it, come and talk to me, come and talk to us. We can explain it." That's all you have to say. You can end the conversation right there, because just by saying that, you've done two very important things. The first is you have set up in their minds when they stumble across porn, as they will, it's not real. And the second thing you've done is you have said, you can come and talk to me about it. And again, you'll want them to do that because what they stumble across can be utterly traumatizing.
So let's talk about sexual values, because I feel like no one else is talking about this. What are they?
Yeah. So no, and you're quite right, Megan, because this is a concept that I and we pioneered with Make Love Not Porn. So I designed Make Love Not Porn around all of my beliefs and philosophies. One of which is that everything in life starts with you and your values. So I regularly ask people this question: what are your sexual values? And nobody can ever answer me because we're not taught to think like that. Our parents bring us up to have good manners, a work ethic, sense of responsibility, accountability. Nobody ever brings us up to behave well in bed. But they should, because in bed, values like empathy, sensitivity, generosity, kindness, honesty, trust, respect are as important as those values are in every other area of our lives that we are actively taught to exercise them. And so at Make Love Not Porn, we are building a community around shared good sexual values and good sexual behavior. And even I, who came up with this idea, I'm blown away by how strong a community that is. And actually, I use this concept to say to parents, you must educate about sex. And very simply, again, think about it as you are educating about good values in this area as much as you educate your kids about good values in every other area. Think about them exactly the same way. And then parents tend to get the importance of overcoming embarrassment and awkwardness and absolutely having this conversation.
Love it. I wanted to ask you, when did you master the art of not giving a fuck? How long ago was that?
So I get asked this regularly, Megan, and honestly, the answer is, 65 years of life. I mean, just by getting older, but I really want to shortcut that process for everybody else. And so actually, it really does go back to what we were just talking about. Because, what I recommend to people if they've never done this exercise before is take a long, hard look inside yourself and identify your own values. What you believe in, what you value, what you stand for, what you're all about. Because, first of all, that makes life so much simpler. Now, life still throws you all the shit it always will, but you know exactly how to respond to that shit in any given situation in a way that is true to you. And by the way, that is the secret of happiness. Living your life and working your work in a way that you know is always true to your values. And then that's what gives you the confidence, not give a damn what anyone else thinks, because all that matters is that you absolutely are living and working your values. And when you know that you're doing that, you don't give a damn what anyone else thinks.
Yeah. You're the Shiro of SexTech. So let's go back a little bit more to the platform itself. I read that it's 1 million users, although that could be an old number. I'm just curious, what percentage of users are Make Love Not Porn stars?
Sure. So the stat, by the way, is that we have had, over 2 million people sign up in our lifetime, basically. They're not all still active users. And it's very interesting because, everybody has their own journey to becoming a Make Love Not Porn star, as we call our contributors. So absolutely, as you say, we have a ton of members who've joined and gone, oh, this looks like fun. Let's make a video ourselves. And by the way, what we always recommend is, if you are curious about becoming a Make Love Not Porn star, just start filming yourselves. Zero obligation. You never have to share it on our platform. But, just doing that can be transformative in itself because, we hear from couples who basically, when you decide to film yourselves having sex, you have to talk about it. And when you talk about it, doesn't matter how long you've been together, the conversation goes places it's never ever gone before. We've had a couple Make Love Not Porn stars say to us, we thought we were open. Doing this just took our relationship to a whole new level, you know? And also, by the way, I remember years ago I was in Brazil, an agency had reached out there saying, we love Make Love Porn, we'll help you, see if we can launch in Brazil. And so I was meeting a bunch of people and talking to them about Make Love Porn, and met a Brazilian woman who the next day told me that she'd gone home after my talk and she'd said to her husband, I heard this woman talk about what she's doing. Let's film ourselves. So they videoed themselves having sex, making love. And she said, they weren't going to share it, but she said she had not realized how incredibly hot it was to watch yourselves making love. And it really is. And again, if you've never filmed yourselves, you will have no idea how arousing that can be. So we say just start filming yourself and see how you feel. Equally, we have, and this is true of a number of members and Make Love Not Porn stars. We have Make Love Porn stars who have found us because they grew up in an extremely repressed, very religious household. So one couple, shared with us that they both come from fundamentalist Christian backgrounds, married young, virgins, all of that. They came across Make Love Not Porn in a magazine, and they said to each other, we have to do this to overcome the repression and shame that's been, grounded in us because of how we're brought up. So they feel themselves, making love for the first time ever, shared on a platform, found it a transformative experience, and shared many videos since. And that is something we hear from people from different, repressive religious backgrounds of that nature. Then, we operate a revenue sharing business model, which I concepted 16 years ago, long before OnlyFans, in order to democratize access to income. So our members pay to subscribe, rent, and stream social sex videos. Half that income goes to our Make Love Porn stars. But we found, that we get Make Love Porn stars come across us, go, oh my God, this is amazing. Let's share a video. Don't even realize they can get paid for doing this. They just welcome what we're doing. All of our community wants to see more open, healthy attitudes towards and dialogue around sex. And that's why they're all a part of Make Love Not Porn.
It's so beautiful. Well, I'm a huge fan of female founders in general in the tech sphere. And like you stated, they're more often than not building things that have positive impact on people, planet, culture. And I just love for you to end by telling us specifically in sex tech, why is it so important we have a female lens building the future?
So, over the past 16 years, I've done many media interviews, and the question I get regularly is, so Cindy, why do you think we're all so repressed about sex? And I've been asked that so often that I now have my answer down pat. 3 reasons. Reason number 1. So reason number 1 is centuries of repression, religion, social-cultural dynamics in every single country in the world. Everything we're talking about is a global issue that I'm tackling. But reason number 2 is the patriarchy. Because historically, every institution, including government and religion, has been male-dominated. We as women have never been allowed to bring our lens to bear on human sexuality, and the world is a poorer place for it. And reason number 3 is related to that, which is there are not enough people like me. And what I mean by that is, society makes it bloody difficult to innovate and disrupt social narratives around sex. I have many friends who are sex tech founders who've tried and given up. And I don't blame them, because my life is shitty on a daily basis because of what I do. But many more people I mean will not give up no matter what. And the great thing is that increasingly there are more and more female founders who see, by the way, not only how important what we're doing is, but how enormous the market and financial opportunity is, who are absolutely determined not to give up. And, I've been parallel pathing 2 things for 16 years, working to build Make Love Not Porn and working to change the cultural and business context around it. And I honestly do see the barriers falling. And interestingly, Especially in the current environment, because I've been saying to women for years, I want you to get very, very angry. And the reason I say that is because as women, we are never, ever encouraged to get angry. Nice girls don't do that. You know. But the reason I want us all to get angry is because when we get angry, we make shit happen. And we have so much to be angry about. And again, especially in the area of sexuality, of sex tech, in a world where rape culture is all pervasive, where Andrew Tate is being celebrated like a god, including by the US government. You know, I am the opposite of Andrew Tate. You know, Make Love Not Porn has been helping boys and men see the power of love and intimacy and human connection, learn good sexuality, good sexual behavior for 12 years. Okay, that is what the world needs. And so, and because when we end rape culture, we end, honestly, the biggest barrier holding women back. You know, so many girls and women's lives have been ruined, by the way, are being ruined at the moment, by the way, by the explosion of intimate image abuse because of male-founded, male-funded apps and platforms. You know, when we end rape culture, we really free women, girls and women, to be able to live their best lives, to contribute to the world. And ironically, we would make boys and men so much happier. They just don't realize it because patriarchy has made them think that everything has to be through their lens. They have to be in control. And they have, you know, I say to men regularly, men, we live in a world where the default setting is always male. Men, you have no idea how much happier you would be living and working in a world that has been equally led, managed, and transformed by all of us together. So that's why.
Well, given that this is also a wellness lens podcast, just quickly, your personal anecdote of, you know, your self-care routine, if you will. I've heard you share it before. I think it's hilarious. And, you know, embody how you just live authentically to your true values.
Sure. So for our listeners' benefit, you know, I was asked some time back on a podcast that was about entrepreneurship and leadership and stress and so on. So Cindy, you know, obviously, you know, you have a very stressful time building Make Love Not Porn. You know, the host said very earnestly, do you have a daily self-care practice to alleviate that stress? And I went, oh yeah, no, I absolutely have a daily self-care practice. My daily self-care practice is I have no husband, I have no children. That is self-care of the highest order. And that is absolutely something I'm grateful for every single day.
Amazing. Well, thank you so, so much for your time and your passion and your work on this. We'll share all of the links so people can join the WeFunder. I highly recommend you subscribe to Cindy's Substack. She's always sharing so many great tips and insights. And I also love your website. I hadn't been to it before. It's absolutely beautiful. Anything else you want to call out specifically as a call to action?
Yep. No, I think, yep. You know, as Megan said, everybody, you know, we would love you to go to wefunder.com/MakeLoveNotPorn and help fund us. Minimum is just $100. It's very affordable. And our campaign closes at the end of April, and we would love to be able to hit our goal by then. Do sign up to MakeLoveNotPorn.com. Do consider becoming a Make Love Not Porn star. We welcome anybody and everybody. And as Megan says, I have a Substack called Dear Cindy, where I answer a question that readers send in each week. So do check it out and do send me any questions you like, because as I think you've realized, you can literally ask me anything.
Thank you, Cindy. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.